A wise person recently said that you're going to leave lockdown a hunk, a chunk, or a drunk. Now, I wonder what kind of pandemic you've had. And I wonder actually whether the same is true of our houses as well. Have you been hoarding or decluttering? Are you the kind of person that spent the whole lockdown buying things off the internet, or are you just waiting for the charity shops to reopen? Well, I'm really pleased to say I'm joined by author Eleanor Ray today, whose debut novel gets right to the heart of all things hoarding. Everything is Beautiful is out now, and Ellen joins me. Hiya, how are you doing?
Hi Anna, it's lovely to be here with you, even if it is virtual.
Yes, exactly. So should I ask you whether you are a hunker chunk or a drunk, or should we leave that one?
Oh, I think that might be one for another day.
Yes, exactly. Tell me though, because I really do think like you couldn't go on one of the other ways, in lockdown, buying lots of stuff, hoarding lots of stuff, trying to get rid of it. So tell me about your new book, because as I said, it really gets to the nub of the matter, doesn't it?
It is. So my book is called Everything is Beautiful. And it's about someone who used to be an artist, but by the time this book opens, she's a hoarder. She doesn't think of herself as a hoarder at all. She just collects things that she sees as beautiful, hence the title. But the things are chipped mugs, translucent empty wine bottles that catch the light, dried husks of honeysuckle, among many, many other things. And these objects have completely filled her house and her life to the extent that there really isn't room for anyone else. And there's barely room for her. And we learned that the hoarding began after the unexplained disappearance of her boyfriend and best friend, which she eventually put down to betrayal. Then this changes for her a little bit when a new family move in next doors. And I know we've all seen kind of neighbours be a bit more influential than they might be in the pandemic when they're the only people we see. These little boys sneak into her garden, knock over a tower of her pots, which is one of the things that she keeps. But underneath, she discovers a clue to her past. And this really opens up the book's central mystery, which is what did happen to her loved ones. And it starts Amy on a path to try to discover the truth and maybe rediscover a little bit of herself in the process.
Wow. So is it kind of a link then between objects and relationships, which kind of leads us to lift the lid on the relationships in the book?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think Amy is someone who she assigns a lot of emotional value to things instead of people. They're things that remind her of her past and those relationships in her past. And in fact, I tell the story in front story and back story. So we see her now collecting lots of objects, and then we see her in the past as well, and why those objects are significant to her. And often in the past, they're not a big deal because she was really about people and relationships. That's what mattered. But the objects are all that she has left now to remind her of these things. And I think in the book, my very favourite relationship is that of Amy and Charles, who's one of the little boys who lives next door. And he's a collector like herself, and I think as many children are. Her passions are, like I said, they're old terracotta pots, broken clocks. He likes diggers, excavators, fire engines. I think you get the idea. But
Yeah.
it means that they really understand each other. And in a way, I think it's this relationship between those two, even more than the clue that she finds, that starts her on this path that maybe might see her healing a little bit.
Wow. And I'm wondering, what was the inspiration for the book? You're going to tell us if you're a hoarder yourself.
I'm not a hoarder, although I found a little patch of my room that's not too not too messy.
That's not
Um,
bad.
but I got the idea from, oddly, my toddler son. It was when I was pregnant with my second child that I noticed he started to collect and treasure little objects, sticks, stones, bottle tops in the park that he'd assign a huge amount of his energy and his affection to. And I wonder if it was that he sensed there were changes afoot. And I just thought it'd be really interesting to explore what would happen if that was an adult collecting things to make them feel safe again. And that's really the genesis of Amy.
Wow. And so, yeah, why does Amy start to hoard?
So I think for her, it's the unexplained nature of what happened
Mhm.
that's led her to be this way, because she doesn't know where they've gone, whether they've betrayed her, whether they're alive or even dead. She doesn't really know how to respond. And it means she can't move on. So she still lives in the same house and she collects all these objects from the past. And Amy's someone, she's got an artistic disposition. She used to be a painter. But when they left, she was left kind of unable to paint anymore. She was too kind of traumatized by what's happened. So now, instead of kind of filling these giant canvases with depictions of the sky, which is really what used to be her inspiration, she focuses down on the beauty of little things. So it's the way the bottle catches the light, or the pattern of a broken mirror, how it echoes a cobweb. And she feels safe around her things because they can't leave her in the same way that people can, and in fact they did. Having said that, it's precarious. Her possessions, they sometimes fall on her. There's not enough room for her. So I was really keen to introduce some characters who could bring her out a little bit and make her start to relate to the world again as she finds out what really happened in the past.
And I think a lot of people can relate to hoarding, actually, you know, in their houses. As I mentioned, you know, we've had a lot of time, haven't we, to stop and reflect on the things that surround us recently. I guess you must have learned quite a lot, actually, about hoarding as a phenomenon while you were doing your research.
I really did. And one thing that I found interesting even after the book came out is a lot of people have said to me, or have written in reviews, that they consider themselves to have hoarding tendencies. And I think it's really human and quite lovely to hold on to things that we see as having value, but no one else might. And why shouldn't we keep things that make us happy? But at the same time, those things need to make us happy. For Amy, they overwhelm her so much that she doesn't have space to be happy, really. But there is a sense of hope to her hoarding. There's a sense that there might be a way for her to heal. And I think that relates to anyone who is maybe thinking about doing a bit of spring cleaning now. There is still hope. That's what spring's all about.
Yeah, it is really interesting, actually, when you talk about having like a symbolic meaning to our possessions, because that's what I guess sets us apart from other creatures. You know, we've always done that, and we've always had kind of things that mean stuff to us personally. But as you say, now is probably a good time to have a spring clean. Do you think the pandemic might have changed actually how we read the book?
It's interesting. I wrote the book before the pandemic, but I think it has raised some issues. For Amy, for example, she's a functioning hoarder. In a way, she has a job. She commutes to work every day. She's always on time. Even commuting sounds amazing now, doesn't it? But now, those boundaries between work life and home life have been blurred. We don't have that physical distinction, a lot of us. And Amy is someone who, she had this professional front that she could keep in the office, and now if she was working from home, she'd struggle. She's someone who'd she'd be camera off if she had a Zoom call, or she'd have to put in one of these false backgrounds, I think. And the other thing I think I alluded to a little bit earlier is neighbours, and the importance of people who live locally to us. Our worlds are much smaller than they were before the pandemic, so it's those people who are close who are the ones that we still see and maybe have a distance chat to in the streets. And I know I've certainly felt a little bit trapped in my house, which is something Amy feels quite often. So I think that's something that people might be able to relate to a bit more in the pandemic as well.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you as well, actually, Anna. So I love your book, The Sound of Your Soul, which is about a dystopian future, a dystopian London. It's not a pandemic, which I think is probably a relief to people. But do you think how people read that might be a little bit different? Now we are living through something so monumental, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. And, you know, people are saying now, aren't they? They're saying coronavirus, well, it's simply the dress rehearsal for climate change and what we've got coming down the tracks. You know, it's going to be bigger, it's going to be scarier. And in the same way, we're really going to have to work together, actually, as a globe of nations to tackle it. When I wrote the book, climate change wasn't such an immediate threat. So I started writing actually back in 2012. It was on the agenda, of course, it was very much up there, but it was, I think, more conceptual than it is now. And I think, you know, during this pandemic, we've seen people like Sir David Attenborough really, really highlight some of the issues. And of course, we've got a new programme coming out with Greta Thunberg, some real activists saying we need to do something about climate change now. And it's interesting, actually, because very recently on Netflix, there's a new documentary called Seaspiracy, and it's all about the oceans. I haven't seen it yet, but I will watch it. But in my book, the fish have all died out because of pollution, because of plastic, because of the way we humans are acting. And one of the characters is really anxious about that. And they say, well, hang on, we came out of the oceans, right? And the fish have died out. What if we're next? What if we are next to become extinct? And I think that concept, that possibility feels more real. And I think you're right. I think it probably feels more real because we are living through a catastrophe of the scale that I think before was consigned to films. I don't know if you saw the film Contagion, which of course is all about a pandemic. I made the mistake of watching it within the pandemic. I was like, I don't need to watch this, I'm living it. They're trying to explain the R rate to me, like, I know. But yeah, I think it probably does feel a bit more tangible, a bit more real, unfortunately. And I think even just living through a disaster like this gives you much more empathy for people who are living through other traumatic events, be that war, be that famine, be that, something, an act of God or an act of nature or whatever. I think it just gives you that kind of, that vibration of fear, really, doesn't it? That kind of like, oh, it could happen to me. So yeah, definitely.
It really does. And I love in your book, it's the future is so vividly imagined and so beautifully portrayed. That yeah, I think hopefully it will resonate with people living through this. And it's nice to see something that we can relate to the emotions of it, but it's not the thing that we're living through right now. It still provides that escape that we want from things that we read and things that we watch.
Yeah, I think we need that escapism, don't we, at the moment? People are really trying to do things that make them think, yes, but we've had so much trauma, haven't we? And things that actually warm the heart. And I know that that's something that your book actually does very well. A lot of the critics have said, I'm yet to read it, I'm really looking forward to it. But people have said it's a book that leaves you with a boost, an uplift.
Yeah, I was really keen to do that in the book. Those are the types of books that I like to read. I like to read something that makes me feel better about people at the end of it, rather than worse. And don't get me wrong, it's got some dark moments, and Amy's not having the best of times when the book starts off. But I did want just this sense of hope at the end, that people can recover and things can start to move forward slowly, tentatively, but it is possible.
Yeah, and I think that's actually something else that the pandemic has given us, is a sense that we spend a lot of time looking at screens. I mean, you're looking at a screen now watching us, thank you. But we do want to kind of go back to the simpler pleasures as well. And reading is one of them. And actually book sales have been up, haven't they, during this pandemic for that very reason. It's good, isn't it, to have that moment of escapism, to sit down with a book, to turn the notifications off for a while and just absorb yourself into another world.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And I've noticed that I've been wanting to read more physical books rather than my Kindle, because you spend so long kind of moving from one screen to another. It's nice to have something that just feels physically different in your hand. Pages are so different from kind of looking at a screen and hearing the sound of the rustling, as you term them. It's really nice, but it's also something that you can do on your own at home or now in the park. It's just a really lovely escape.
Yeah, and am I going to want to have a spring clean, do you think, after I read the book?
I think you might do. I certainly found as I was writing the book, I was noticing little pockets of mess, and I was like, oh, am I turning into Amy now? But yeah, I mean, there's a big difference between hoarding disorder, where things kind of become out of control, and just like I said, holding on to things that make you happy, and go easy on yourself.
Absolutely. And actually, do you know what? I'm going to let you into a secret now, right? Okay. So Liz and I went to school together. And one of my things during this lockdown has been to go through some of my old school notes and not hoard them, funnily enough. But I wanted to read them before I got rid of them. And you'll love this. I found a note from our English teacher. You remember Mr. Jackson?
Oh, I do remember Mr. Jackson.
Yeah. He said, right, I'm not going to be able to make the lesson today. I've got something to do. And he left us all this kind of photocopied piece of paper. He said, I've read your essays. They were all dreadful, except Liz and Tom. So where you go? Well done. He said, but you all need to do work, including Liz and Tom. So yeah, I am quite enjoying having a clear out of my very own.
Great. And I'll just say that Liz is actually me. I'm using a pen name, Eleanor Ray, which I love. I have to say, I love my new pen name. Eleanor is my middle name, and it's great to have it see its time in the sunshine.
Now, where can we buy the book? That's the important thing.
So the exciting news is that the book is out now. It's out from the 15th of April, and shops are open. So I'm really looking forward to sanitizing my hands, putting on my face mask, and going around and signing a few copies and just seeing it out in the wild. That's going to be really exciting.
And I think that's one of the other things we've missed, really, isn't it, during this pandemic? Like, I think we probably took it for granted before, to be honest, just being able to walk into a bookshop, but now it's going to feel like hallowed ground again, isn't it? So I look forward to that. And will you sign mine?
Absolutely, absolutely, I'd love to.
Fantastic. Eleanor Ray, thank you. We'll talk again soon.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Anna.